Yes, hello everyone, and welcome to the continuation of our training on strategic negotiation and leadership. Strategic negotiation and leadership course. This is the part three. Part three of this course, having done part one and part two, and in continuation, we shall be looking at the part three of this course where we had already started the module four of this particular course. And the module four was on the aspect of leadership principles in negotiation. We had already, discussed in detail the key leadership styles and their impact on negotiation. We have looked at the transformational leadership. We talked about transactional leadership, servant leadership, autocratic leadership, and also the fifth one being democratic leadership. We discussed the characteristics of each of these leadership styles and their impact on negotiation in part two. And also in part two, the concluding part of part two, we looked at the role of emotional intelligence in leadership. And of course, we looked at the key components of emotional intelligence and their relevance, where we looked at the first one being self awareness, and we also talked about the second one, which is self regulation. And we discussed that self regulation has to do with managing emotions, involving controlling one's emotions and impulses, and also maintaining self discipline you know. And we discovered that the impact of self-regulation on negotiation is that self-regulated negotiators can manage stress, handle conflicts constructively, and even maintain a professional demeanor. The third role of emotional intelligence, in terms of one of the another component, is the component of motivation. We know that there's always what we call intrinsic motivation. Emotionally intelligent leaders are driven by intrinsic motivation because they strive for goals and personal growth rather than external rewards. And what is the impact of intrinsic motivation on negotiation? Is that motivated negotiators are persistent, they are resilient and focused on achieving mutually beneficial outcomes. And of course, another key component of emotional intelligence is empathy. Empathy has to do with understanding others. It involves recognizing and understanding the emotion and perspective of others. Empathetic leaders are skilled in listening and building rapport. You know, and the impact of empathy on negotiation is that empathy allows negotiators to understand the interests and concerns of the other party, which can facilitate trust and collaboration. And of course, the fifth aspect is social skills, which involves building relationships, because we know that social skills encompass effective communication, conflict management, and even relationship building abilities. The impact of social skills on negotiation is that negotiators with strong social skills can navigate complex interactions, building alliances and also influencing others positively. Now, let us quickly look at building trust and credibility as a leader. What does it mean to build trust and credibility as a leader? Trust and credibility are essential for successful negotiation. What that means is that leaders who are trusted and credible can foster a cooperative environment. They can reduce conflict and even achieve better outcomes. And what are the key strategies for building trust and credibility as a leader? Remember, this course is on strategic negotiation and leadership. Strategic negotiation. So we are looking at the leadership component of this particular course, and we are talking about building trust and credibility as a leader, and we want to look at those key strategies for building trust and credibility. One is consistency. Consistency has to do with reliable actions, consistent behavior and actions that build trust over time. Leaders should follow through on commitments and even demonstrate reliability. The impact on negotiation of that is that consistency reassures the other party that agreements will be honored, And of course, it reduces uncertainty and even fosters cooperation. That is very, very important. Then number two is transparency. Building trust and credibility as a leader, transparency is key. Transparency has to do with open communication because it involves being open and honest in communication, sharing relevant information, and even avoiding deceit. The impact on negotiation of a transparent negotiator is that it can build trust by providing clear and accurate information, which facilitates informed decision making. And of course, what about the area of competence? Demonstrating expertise. Credibility is enhanced by demonstrating competence and expertise in relevant fields or in relevant areas. Leaders should continuously develop their skills and knowledge. It is also very important. The impact of that on negotiation is that competent negotiators are respected and trusted. And of course, this strengthens their bargaining position and influence. Then the aspect of, the fourth one is integrity, ethical behavior. Integrity involves adhering to ethical principles and acting with honesty and fairness. So leaders should prioritize ethical considerations in their actions. So one thing you must understand is the impact on negotiation is that integrity builds long-term trust and credibility as the other party feels confident in the leader's commitment to fairness and ethical behavior. So the fifth one is empathy and respect. Valuing others. Leaders should demonstrate empathy and respect for others, valuing their perspective and needs. And the impact of such on negotiation is that empathetic and respectful negotiators build trust. They build strong relationships and they facilitate cooperation and mutual understanding. Now let us look at, it's a sub-module under this module 4, which talks about leading diverse teams through negotiation. Leading diverse teams through negotiation. What does it mean? Leading diverse teams through negotiations presents unique challenges and opportunities. Effective leaders must leverage diversity to enhance creativity, problem solving, and overall negotiation outcomes. Now, what are the strategies for leading diverse teams? One is to embrace diversity. One is to embrace diversity. Embracing diversity has to do with valuing differences. Leaders should recognize and value the diverse backgrounds, perspectives, and skills of team members. And the impact on negotiation of this is that embracing diversity actually enhances creativity and innovation, which can lead to more comprehensive and effective negotiation solutions. The second aspect is that as per when you talk about strategies for leading diverse teams is to foster inclusion. Inclusive environment creates it creates a situation where all team members feel valued, respected, and heard. And the impact on negotiation is that an inclusive environment encourages open communication and collaboration, which can improve team dynamics and negotiation outcomes. And of course, the third aspect is to leverage diverse perspectives. Leveraging diverse perspective has to do with encouraging participation of all teams to contribute their ideas and perspectives. The fourth aspect is what? Addressing bias and stereotypes. You use awareness and education. You promote awareness of biases and stereotypes. You provide education and train to help team members recognize and overcome these biases. The impact on negotiation of this is that when you address biases and stereotypes, it fosters a more equitable and respectful negotiation environment. Meanwhile, which will, of course, improving trust and collaboration. Of course, you must adapt leadership style. Flexible approach is key. When you adapt leadership style to suit the needs and preferences of diverse team members, consider cultural differences and even individual communication styles. The impact on negotiation of this is that a flexible leadership style enhances team cohesion and even effectiveness, of course, leading to more successful negotiation outcomes. These are some of the strategies for leading diverse teams. When you embrace diversity, you foster inclusion, you leverage diverse perspectives, you address bias and stereotypes, and of course, you also adapt leadership your styles and make your leadership approach flexible. So, in this module, we have explored key leadership principles in negotiation. including the impact of different leadership styles. That is in this module 4. So the role of emotional intelligence, strategies for building trust and credibility, and leading diverse teams. So by understanding and applying these principles, participants will enhance their leadership effectiveness in negotiations and even achieve better outcomes. Let us quickly look at a very important aspect, which is module 5, talking about effective communication in negotiation. Because we know that effective communication is fundamental to a successful negotiation. This module will explore various aspects of communication, which including verbal and non-verbal skills, active listening, persuasion, tactics, and even managing conflict. Now, let us look at verbal and non-verbal communication skills. We know that communication in negotiation involves both verbal and non-verbal elements. So, mastering these skills can significantly enhance your ability to convey messages, understand the other party, and even build rapport. Now let's look at the verbal communication aspect, which has to do with what? Clarity and conciseness. You must speak clearly and concisely to avoid misunderstandings. You must use simple language and avoid jargon unless you are sure the other party understands it. Still under verbal communication, your tone and pace. You must adjust your tone and pace according to the situation. A calm and steady tone conveys confidence and composure, while a varied pace can emphasize important points. Now, assertiveness, still under verbal communication. Assertiveness is also an element that is important. So, being assertive without being aggressive, clearly express your needs and viewpoints while respecting the other party's perspectives. And the fourth aspect of verbal communication is what? Questioning. Using open-ended questions to encourage dialogue and gather information. So, because closed-ended questions can also be used to confirm, specifics. Now, the second category is the non-verbal communications, which has to do with body language, facial expressions, gestures, and proximity and space. Under the body language, of course, you know that as an aspect of non-verbal communication, facial expression, body language, your body language should align with your verbal messages. You must maintain an open posture, make eye contact, avoid crossing your arms, which can signal defensiveness. The second aspect under non-verbal communication is facial expressions. So be mindful of your facial expressions as they can convey emotions and reactions. A genuine smile can build rapport, while a frown may signal disagreement or disapproval. Gestures, you can use gestures, to emphasize points and convey enthusiasm. However, avoid excessive or distracting movements. Then the fourth one is proximity and space. You respect personal space, as standing too close can be perceived as aggressive. So adjust your proximity based on cultural norms and the other party's comfort. So you must look at all of these aspects. Then, of course, active listening and questioning techniques. Active listening and questioning techniques, because we know that active listening and effective questioning are essential for understanding the other party's interests and concerns. Yes, these skills help build rapport, clarify information, and facilitate collaborative problem solving. Under active listening, we must not forget that under active listening, the first thing is what? Focus. You must give your full attention to the speaker. Avoid distractions and multitasking during the conversation. That's under active listening. Still under active listening, you must show interest. Use verbal and non-verbal cues to show that you are engaged. You must not maintain eye contact and even use encouraging words like "I see," or "Go on, go on." These are ways of showing interest. Then you can also, still under active listening, you can look at paraphrase and even summarize. You can repeat back what you have heard in your own words to confirm understanding. This can be done by saying, for example, so what you are saying is that. Or, for example, if you say something like, if I understand correctly, you mean blah, blah, blah. So that is how to paraphrase and summarize. These are all aspects of active listening. And even reflect your emotions. Reflect emotions. Acknowledge the speaker's emotions by reflecting them. For example, it sounds like you are feeling frustrated about something, or it sounds like you are feeling frustrated about for it, So these are reflective emotions. Now, questioning techniques too is another key aspect. Open-ended questions, we have closed-ended questions, we have probing questions, and we have clarifying questions. Open-ended questions should be asked, to encourage detailed responses and exploration of ideas. For example, can you tell me more about your priorities in this negotiation? Can you tell me more about your priorities in this negotiation? That is an open-ended question. It is important because it encourages detailed responses and exploration of ideas. Then you should also know, under questioning techniques, you should also know about the closed-ended questions. So you use closed-ended questions to gather specific information or confirm details. For example, is the delivery date negotiable? Is the delivery date negotiable? It's an example. That's a closed-ended question. Then you look at the third aspect of questioning technique, which has to do with probing questions. You know, probing questions has to do with what? Digging deeper into issues to uncover underlying interest and concerns. For example, like, why is this deadline important to you? Why is this deadline important to you? That is a probing question. It will help to dig deeper, into issues to uncover underlying interest. Then look at clarifying questions. Clarifying questions has to do with what? Ensuring that you understand the other party's statements clearly. For example, when you say urgent, what time frames are you referring to? Those are clarifying questions. Somebody says, okay, when you said urgent, what time frame are you referring to? That is a clarifying question. Then we must not forget. Another aspect is what? Persuasion and influence tactics. Still under this module or module 5, effective communication in negotiation. Very, very important. Persuasion and influence tactics. We know that persuasion and influence are key aspects of negotiation. Effective negotiators use a variety of tactics to persuade the other party and influence outcomes. One, under persuasion and influence tactics is what we call ethos. Ethos, that is credibility. You establish expertise. When you establish expertise, you ensure that you demonstrate, your knowledge and expertise on the subject matter. You provide evidence, examples to support your claims. You build trust, so you try to be honest and transparent in your communication. So you follow through on promises and commitments to establish trustworthiness. Ethos, very, very important. We must take note of that as we progress. Then what about building trust? Being honest and transparent in your communication. You follow through. Then, of course, with the pathos. Pathos has to do with what? Emotional what? Appeal. Emotional appeal must get to do with connect. It's a way of connecting emotionally. Appealing to the emotions of the other party by understanding their needs and concerns. So you use stories and examples that resonate with their experiences. Now let us go to the third aspect that has to do with what? Logos. Logos has to do with logical appeal. You use facts and data, then you use structured arguments. Then you look at another aspect that has to do with what? Reciprocity, give and take. Reciprocity has to do with, you create a sense of obligation by offering concessions or benefits. When you give something, the other party is more likely to reciprocate. Then the fifth one is what? Commitment and consistency. You seek commitments, gain small commitments early in the negotiation. People are more likely to remain consistent with their initial commitments and even make further concessions. Then social proof. Use examples and what have you. Now, how do you manage conflict and difficult conversations? Managing conflict and difficult conversations in any negotiation. Conflict, we must not forget, is a natural part of negotiation. So effective negotiators manage conflict constructively and even navigate difficult conversations to reach mutually acceptable outcomes. First of all, in managing conflicts and difficult situations, you have to understand the sources of conflict. Understand the sources of conflict. First of all, is looking at the interests, looking at the values, and looking at the perception. Under interest, we know that conflict can arise from differing interests and priorities. So understanding these differences is the first step in addressing them. Then looking at values, conflict may also stem from different values and beliefs, so they are often more deeply rooted and harder to resolve. Then in the area of perception, misunderstandings and misconceptions can lead to conflict. So clarifying perceptions can help resolve issues. So understanding the source of conflict is one major or the most fundamental or the first step in managing conflict during difficult conversations. Now, looking at conflict management styles, we know we have 5 different conflict management styles. We have the avoiding, we have the accommodating, we have the competing, compromising, and also what? Collaborating. These are 5 different conflict management styles. Each of these styles can be used. Avoiding can actually be used to temporarily sidestep the conflict. So this can be useful when emotions are very high, but it is not in a long term, it is not a long-term solution. Then the accommodating is like giving to the other parties, giving in to the other party's demands. This can preserve relationship but may lead to imbalanced agreement. Then competing, of course, competing has to do with what? Asserting your position forcefully. This can be effective in high stakes situations, but may even damage relationships. So compromising is another conflict management style that has to do with finding a middle ground where both parties make concessions. This can lead to quick solutions, but may not fully satisfy both parties. Okay. Yeah. And of course, the fifth one is collaborating. That has to do with what? Working together to find a win-win solution. This is the most effective style for integrating negotiations, but requires time and effort. Now, let us look at strategies for difficult conversations. Strategies for difficult conversations. 1, prepare. 2, stay calm. 3, use I. Use the I statements. And of course, 4, listen actively. And 5, focus on what? Solutions. These are the strategies. Strategies for difficult conversations. The first one of prepare means you have to plan your approach and anticipate the other party's reactions. So gather relevant information and consider potential solutions. Staying calm is very important. Staying calm has to do with what? Managing your emotions and staying calm during the conversation. So that means you use deep breathing or other techniques to stay centered. The third aspect for strategy for managing difficult conversation is what? Is the using the I statements. Focus on expressing your own feelings and needs rather than blaming or criticizing the other party. For example, you can say something like, I feel frustrated when deadlines are missed. This can calm situations. Now, listening actively. That is another strategy for difficult conversations. When you show that you are listening and understanding the other person's perspective, it validates their feelings and concerns. Then you look at focus on solutions. You shift the conversation from blame to problem solving. So when you do that, you collaborate to find solutions that address both parties' needs. So what we have just done in this module, in module 5, is that we have explored essential communication skills for effective negotiation, including verbal and non-verbal communication, active listening, persuasion and influence tactics, and even conflict management. By mastering these skills, you will enhance or you can enhance your ability to navigate negotiations successfully and achieve your desired outcomes. We will quickly move to the next module, which is module 6. Module 6 will be looking at cultural considerations. Cultural considerations in negotiations. This is very important because we know that negotiations in a globalized world often involve parties from different cultural backgrounds. So, understanding and adapting to cultural differences is crucial for successful negotiations. So, this module covers the importance of cultural awareness, adapting negotiation styles, and even strategies for managing cross-cultural negotiations. Now, how do we understand cross-cultural differences? Because in negotiations, cultures significantly influences negotiation styles. That is it. Culture significantly influences negotiation styles. It influences communication, it influences decision-making processes, and even conflict resolution. So recognizing and respecting these differences is the first step towards effective cross-cultural negotiation. Number one, you should look at cultural dimensions. There are some cultures that have individualism and there are cultures that have collectivism. You must recognize them. So, individualistic cultures, for example, is like the USA and the UK. They emphasize personal goals and independence. But collectivist cultures like Japan, like China, they prioritize group goals and interdependence. That means they love it to be more collective. But in that of US, they prefer their own goals to be personal and interdependent. I mean, independence. The next aspect under cultural dimension is power distance. You know, there's high power distance cultures. We have cultures that have high power distance. For example, India, Mexico, they accept hierarchical structures and authority. Whereas low power distance cultures, example like Denmark and Sweden, they value equality and participative decision making. These are various cultural dimensions that you as a negotiator must comprehend, must even appreciate and understand. Uncertainty avoidance too. There are some cultures with high uncertainty avoidance, like Greece and Portugal. They prefer clear rules and stability. While those with low uncertainty avoidance, example like Singapore, Jamaica, they are more comfortable with ambiguity and risk taking. These are still other cultural dimensions. Then we have cultural dimensions of masculinity versus femininity. You know, so masculine cultures like Japan, Germany, they value competitiveness and achievement. While feminine cultures like Norway and Sweden, they prioritize cooperation, care, and even quality of life. Then there's long-term versus short-term orientation. There's, the long-term oriented cultures like China and South Korea, they focus on future rewards and perseverance. While short-term oriented cultures like US and even Nigeria will emphasize on immediate results and traditions. So these are the cultural dimensions that we must understand as negotiators. Then we have communication styles. Communication styles, we have the high context versus the low context communication. The high context cultures like Japan and Arab countries rely heavily on non-verbal cues and implicit communication. But low context cultures like Germany, USA value direct and explicit communication. These are communication styles. We also have the formal versus informal. Some cultures prefer formal communication and titles. Example like France and India. While other cultures adopt a more informal approach. So, and of course, in the aspect of decision making and negotiation styles too, cultures differ. We have the consensus versus majority rule. So we have cultures that differ in their approach to decision making. Some cultures seek consensus, example like Japan, while others may rely on majority rule or autocratic what? Decisions. We have another aspect of decision making that has to do with risk taking versus risk averse. Understanding the risk appetite of different cultures can help tailor negotiation strategies. Some cultures are more open to taking risk, like the USA, while others are more conservative, for example, like the Switzerland. These are various, cross-cultural differences in the aspect of cultural dimensions, in the aspect of communication styles, and in the aspect of decision making that must be understood and appreciated by negotiators in order to have effective negotiation. Now, how do you adapt negotiation styles to different cultures? Because the essence of knowing different cultures is to know the essence of it is to understand how to adapt negotiation styles to different cultures. Because adapting your negotiation style to align with the cultural preferences of the other party can enhance mutual understanding and even improve negotiation outcomes. Very important. Now, how do you adapt these negotiation styles? The first one is what? Research and preparation. You must do cultural research. Conduct thorough research on the other party's cultural background, the other party's business etiquette, and even his negotiation norms. You must look. I mean, there's another aspect under research and reason. You look for local expertise. Engage experts or cultural advisors to gain deeper insight and avoid cultural fox paths. It is very key. Another aspect for adopting negotiation styles to different cultures is what? Building relationships. Building relationship has to do with what? Trust and rapport. Because in many cultures, building a personal relationship is a prerequisite for successful negotiation. So you must invest time in getting to know the other party and establishing trust. Then, of course, communication adjustments, still under adapting negotiation style to align with the cultural differences. We're talking about communication adjustments. you know so your language and interpretation, if there is any language, if there's a language